pass the table. Wait.
Well, welcome. We are all glad that you are here this afternoon. My name is Mary Nelson Abbott. I'm the pastor of Mallett's Bay Congregational Church in Colchester, and this is my associate. I will let her introduce herself.
I'm Kathy Clark. I'm the pastor of the Federated Church of East Arlington, down in Bennington County. And we are both members of the Stewardship Department of the Vermont Conference. And today we're hoping to talk about money and stewardship. But before we get started, we want to know who you are and what brings you here. So we would love if you would tell us your name, the church you're from, and maybe in a sentence why you're here. Like what's curious about this workshop? So start.
Ann Miller, I'm from the First Congregational Church in Springfield, and I'm here because I'm on the Stewardship Committee and just seeking all the information I can get.
Judy Drury, East First Congregational Church, and I'm the treasurer, among other things.
I'm Lucia Button from the Bradford UCC, and I'm not on any committee, but the word tithe seems to be a naughty word in our church. Nobody wants to talk about it, and I'd like to learn how we can overcome that.
I'm Joanne Hardy. I'm from the Bethany Church in Montpelier. I'm on the Stewardship Committee, and I have been working for years to make friends with money.
How's that going?
It's going very well.
Oh, Mike Ford, Second Congregational Church in Hyde Park. I'm also on the Department of Stewardship and Financial Health. It's the first time I've seen this presentation.
Hey, Doug.
I'm Doug Carter. I'm the pastor of the Danville Congregational Church, and I'm here because Mary and Kathy are my homies.
I'm James Brown from the Dummerston Congregational Church. I'm a deacon at our church, and budgets are very hard for our people to work on, and I think they don't quite understand what they're doing most of the time. They mistake last year's repeat it in some way, and that's not really the way we want it to. So we're looking for some new solutions. Great.
I'm Dwayne Brown. I'm sorry, did I? I'm Dwayne Brown, Sharon Congregational Church. I'm pastor there. I'm not sure what else question I'm supposed to be answering.
Why here?
I heard about this process in the recent association meeting. Jim had mentioned it, and I was curious to see what it's all about.
I'm Alan Hinska from the Warren Church, and I'm here because I was told by my minister.
An honest answer. Thank you. Very honest of you.
I could try that.
See how far you get, Doug.
You have to have some nice product.
That's right.
I'm Sherry Lovell. I'm a visitor to the conference. I work with United Church Funds in New York, and I'm sitting by the plug.
Another honest answer.
Well, thank you all for being here. We want you, as you watch us today, as you watch this presentation, we want you to keep in mind that this presentation has two layers. So on the surface, we are talking about the conference budget today, and we are using the actual numbers of the actual conference budget in our presentation. But we can tailor this presentation. It's designed to be tailored for every congregation. So if you would like to invite us, think about, as you are watching this, think about whether or not you think this might be an effective presentation in your congregation. We are very happy to do a little math for you, make it as easy as possible, to come present this in your congregation. So just keep that in the back of your minds as you listen to us today. And also, I think most of you saw the sign-up sheet when you came in. If you would like some specific materials afterwards, or if you want to let us know, the sign-up sheet is a good way to let us know that you would like us to come to your congregation. So most of you, I think, checked in with it before we started, but if you need to add something to it after we're done, please feel free to do so.
And as Mary mentioned, we are using the real conference figures, and they are the figures that in a short while we will be reviewing with all of our fellow attendees when we look at this year's at the budget process for the conference. And we're looking, so we're using real figures, and we are you don't need to pull out your budget or anything like that. We've got all that, the information will need to be up here, but we're hoping that by doing this with us now, you maybe even have a clearer understanding of what you're about to see afterwards. You get many benefits from this.
Yeah, and there are going to be a couple of times when we ask you to take a guess how much something might cost, so don't look too far ahead in your booklets because the answers are in the booklets. Don't look too far ahead. But as we begin, before we begin the actual slideshow, before we begin the actual slideshow, we would like to have you guys tell us what is it that you love about the Vermont Conference?
Stop there. I'll give you the
Okay,
handout before you get too far back.
Just take a moment, but what is it, can you just raise your hand, what is it that you love? What do you think we do well in this conference? Might be another way of
And I will be writing down.
Write it down. Joy?
Really, UCC, I think in general comes to laugh. And I was really surprised, I really love the surprise dance.
Gosh, yes.
And I think that really is a fertile ground for
Who else? What do you love about the Vermont Conference, or what do you think we do well?
It's our contact with the denomination. And otherwise, going back.
Staff support local churches. Excuse me.
Staff support local churches, very important. Yes.
One of the things that I became aware of, and I don't know if everybody is, that the Vermont Conference did some very hard work of confronting the reality of its financial position sooner than a number of other conferences found themselves able to do that. And it was painful work, I know, but it was absolutely crucial because it set us up to really think hard and carefully about what the conference's mission was.
So we're
Did you get that all,
able to-
Kathy?
We were able to address some of our financial concerns early on, which has given us a springboard to talk about our mission rather than being worried about our finances. That's what I'm going to say.
Yep.
What else do you love about the conference? Keeps us informed.
Yeah, like some kid and things that come out, I think that's great. Knowing what's going on everywhere.
Friendly people on the other end. Yes, on the other end of the phone and the computer. We love our conference staff.
Don't necessarily love our computers.
Well, some of them.
We love all of our
That's
conference
all
staff.
right.
Couldn't resist.
What else? What else do we love about our conference? What else do we do well? Have we-
Vision.
Vision.
The scenery causes us to celebrate creation more, I think, than some of our conferences.
So an awareness of our environment causes us to celebrate and care for our environment. We could, like we could probably fill this whole board with things if we took the time, but let's move on. When you give money to the conference, whether it's Friends of the Conference direct donation, or it's your church's, OCWM, our church's wider mission contribution, or if it's even just your per capita payment, every church makes a payment to the conference office, depending on how many members they have, just the per capita. All of that money that you're giving, you generally probably tend to think of that money as going to support making these things possible, right? Do you think at all about the fact that it's also paying the water bill? You do? Lots of people don't want to give, they want to give their money to these things, but they don't want to give to the water bill because it's not sexy. It's not interesting. It's not fun to think about getting the water bill paid. But none of these things could happen if we didn't have a toilet in the conference office. I mean, how many cups of coffee would we drink if we didn't have any running water in the conference? And then we couldn't wash the cups. I mean, it would just, what would we do? Conference meetings run on coffee, right?
On the other hand, my congregation is exactly the opposite. Their donations And so the offering plate, they would like to rather see people pay the water bill, the electricity, and keep the building paid, and keep the money in the church than they tend to spend for water issues. And that's a problem for us.
Okay, okay. Well, that's something we can talk about in your congregation. When your money comes from your congregation to the conference, people tend to think of these things more and think less about paying the mortgage on the building, et cetera, which we have now paid off. Wonderful. And so that's important to be aware of.
And what we're going to show you here is a way of thinking about this and what Mary was just talking about, the basics like paying the electric bill and paying the salaries and paying for things within the conference budget, but thinking about it in terms of the wonderful things that the conference does. So almost reframing and saying that it will be important, and you'll see this in the charts, to have the money to be able to pay for those necessities, but in a way that in which you're looking at the bigger picture. And so
what we're going to introduce to you is called a narrative budget. How many of you have seen a narrative budget before? Oh, more hands than I was expecting.
Any of you currently use that as your major means of budgeting right now?
Do you use that tool in your church? Joanne, you guys do. Okay. So we're going to show you a narrative budget. And what does a narrative budget do? Essentially, a narrative budget tells the story of the congregation's ministry. Instead of looking at a line item budget and a spreadsheet and your eyes cross and you get the little drool coming out of your mouth because it's so boring and you fell asleep, and you just take last year's numbers and put them into this year. A narrative budget tells the story of what we do with the money that's given to the conference in this case. So it tells the story of making these things possible. And it helps us talk about what we're actually doing, the ministry that we're actually doing, rather than looking at a set of line items and being
So in order to do all this stuff, we're going to actually use real, the conference actual budget numbers, and this is what we would do if we came to your church to do this, but we tried to kind of combine them into categories and do the math so that they make more sense and are more broadly painted. So we will show you that as we go through each of the various items. And now, we know that pledging and money and all of that is an uncomfortable subject for lots of folks. And especially at the church level, oftentimes when you say the word pledging, the thing people start like getting all tensed up about is, uh-oh, they didn't know how much I individually gave. And that's a scary thought. In a few churches I know that it isn't such a secret, but in most churches it's a highly protected piece of information that maybe only one or two people actually know or something. And we're here to assure you that we appreciate that sense of confidentiality that's surrounding all those gifts. That will never be something we're divulging, right? What you are going to hear about today, when you hear about figures, are the collective, what churches do as a whole, not what individual parishioners do. So, and how that then translates in when we put all those churches together into what the conference has to work with.
And at the conference level, what your church gives is public information. So it's not a breach of confidentiality to say, oh, Sharon Church gives so much, and Hyde Park gives so much. That's all public, and that was all sent to you.
And I should edit my answer. We don't do only the narrative budget because we do the regular budget and the narrative. We're working our way slowly to more narrative, but that's too much of a leap, I think, to go from.
Well, a narrative budget is an educational tool, but it's, you still need to have the line item
The details.
details,
Right.
but those details aren't salient to everyone.
Right, and now the narrative budget, where people are looking at that more.
Exactly. You can see where you fit in.
Right.
Right. You can't necessarily see that when you're looking at the series of line items.
Okay, so we're going to try to guess, and there's no right or wrong answer, but try to guess. There is. Right or wrong is from your perspective. These are guesses on your part without looking at anything. As far as how much money you think we as a conference spend on these things in an average given fiscal year.
How much much do you think it takes to make
The
these
whole
things
budget?
happen? Yeah.
Much of the whole budget. What do you think,
The whole
what do you think,
budget.
how big do you think the conference budget is? Anybody have any ideas?
$1 million?
$1 million.
$350.
You're an happy marriage, Joe.
You're the hiding, Joe.
I love you.
You've been hiding.
125.
600.
600,000. Two. You were the closest. Alan, is that right?
Helmut.
Helmut. Helmut.
Jawohl.
Ah. Helmut was the closest. Jim, go ahead and do the big reveal. Yeah, we skipped a bunch
I got
of
behind.
this. Sorry. So, this is our conference budget, $657,659. That's what we are going to be spending this week. That means that all of these things we listed, paying our staff and paying all of our everything, and making programs possible, making annual meeting possible, all happens with $657,000 and a little change.
So, let's take a look now at how this is broken down and,
You'll be able to see it as it scrolls up.
yeah, so direct support of the wider church is 21,000, and that's the money that goes.
21%.
21%, I'm sorry. 21% of the money goes, 135,000, goes back to Cleveland, to the United Church of Christ, the home church. So that is what goes from us to them, and that's a percentage, that's 35% of what's given to us through our church's wider mission. So when each church gives their church's wider mission, you take that all collectively, 35% of that is what we pay, and that's by vote. That's been determined by by an annual meeting to decide what percentage is going to Cleveland and what percentage is going to stay here in Vermont. And
that works out to 21% of our overall budget.
Right. Okay. And then 36% of our expenses go to direct support of congregations, and that's like a whole bunch of stuff. The search and call process, when you're looking for a new pastor, that's a very expensive, high-ticket item.
The average search and call process costs for each church, costs the conference $10,000 to $12,000.
So that's a big ticket item.
So if that were to be a user fee, that's what it would wind up. If it
Right.
was based on a user fee,
Right.
that's what it
Like
would
if the
cost.
church had to pay to do the process themselves,
Right.
that would be what they'd have to cough up. Then there's other things in that category, like VAST and training, all the trainings we do, like when Diana Butler VAST came last month, when there's the campaign, the stewardship campaign that we do, the planned giving, capital campaigns, all those kind of campaigns that keep this entity running, is what support to our churches and associations makes up. Then our next category is 12%, and that goes to support for pastors. And that is some training that happens on the part of the conference. We have clergy convocation, for example, in the fall. There's other resources available to clergy and churches working with their clergy. So it's
Pastoral care for
pastoral
pastors.
care for the pastors.
Yes.
Yes, so that's where that 12% comes in.
And so it's good to note that direct support to churches and associations and direct support to pastors, total is 48% of the budget, which is a huge chunk done.
So does that, so the cost of salaries is
Built
falls
in.
into both
Built
of
in.
those
Built into the whole thing.
categories?
Yes, so
So that's not
percentages,
separate
so
wedge.
percentages of
Correct.
Jim's salary that would be broken into each of these categories
Okay.
is part of that picture. The part of Lynn's salary that goes in each of those categories is part of the picture.
Okay.
The fraction of use of the building that goes into each of those categories is a part of it.
So the time that I spent with Lynn in kind of individual conversation around personal issues.
Right.
That's a part of what
That's
costs
part of
$79,000
this,
to
that's that.
$80,000.
Yes.
Having Jim come talk to your congregation directly about stewardship and training you guys for a stewardship campaign.
That's part of the cost
That's part of
support
the
of our.
support of
got it.
congregations. Yeah.
Then another 13% goes to intrastate, within our state ministries. Things like Covenant Hills, Viliac, Atkinson House, other things, ways that we do advocacy and service to Vermonters in various ways as a conference. That makes up that 13%. A number of you mentioned things like communications that you really value in the conference, and this is the 5%. 5% is spent on the resource program that Sybil administers so ably. It has to do with everything when we send out e-kits that go out, when there's communication going in any way, shape, or form back and forth to the conference, from the conference to the national office, from the conference to the churches. All of that communication stuff comes under that 5%, and that the maintenance of the website, all of those kinds of things.
So I've got a question about that may be a little off topic, but it's kind of back to a line item question, and it's the kind of question I think that members of my church would ask if we were doing our budget this way instead of a line item way. How much was the percent of communications and resources before we went to the e-kit? In other words, when we were still mailing
Everything.
monthly newsletter inserts to the country. Do you know, Jim, what that?
It was at
looked
least
like?
double.
At least double.
Because we saved, going to electronic communications, we saved $3,000 a year just in postage. And another $2,000 a year in paper and toner. And doing electronic communications saved us around $10,000.
The reason that I ask that is, while it's, people would want to see the story being told as a narrative budget and making sure that that's happening still, and the answer is yes, it's happening. Even though the percent is smaller, it's not like we're making it less of a priority. It's that we're doing it more efficiently and cost effectively.
Right.
But it's still as important a part of the story.
Exactly.
Just telling the story in a
Of
different
what,
way.
yeah, of keeping informed.
Exactly, but that allows us, instead of putting money into paper and toner and postage, we can put that money back into support for pastors and congregations, or maybe give a little bit more to the wider church, which we have committed we would like to be able to do, et cetera. So that frees up that money for other priorities.
And that communications and resources, I mean, that's a very narrow piece of communication, right? Because there's so much communication that supports pastors, support churches, associations, that's major communication. So you're probably just talking about the way you communicate electronically as opposed to mailings.
This communications and resources also includes the resource center.
I was just about to say.
And, we could buy more books.
Right.
Or have more other resources
Videos.
available.
And just as a advertisement, our church now for the second year is not spending anything on curriculum because we're getting curriculum support directly from the resource center. So that's a huge benefit the conference is able to offer us as a congregation, that we can carry out our children's Sunday school ministry without buying curriculum, or borrowing it from the resource center.
That's fabulous.
I might add that our church, certainly we're halfway, shouldn't even say halfway. Most of the newer members of the church want the electronic delivery, but a lot of the older members of the church aren't on a computer at all, so they still want paper copy. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to switch from one to the other, keep the others happy, but if we switch, we won't get the bulk mailing rate anymore.
We just did that in our
Which
church.
is no big deal, but I mean, that's the process we're going through.
And we figured that out. I mean, I can tell you later how we did
Okay,
that.
good. I'd love
Yeah.
to
For
hear.
another workshop.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we were
post
just moving
workshop.
to that, yeah.
As Brian McLaren said, you have to decide whether you're in the phone booth business or the communications
Yeah.
business. Because if you're in the phone booth business, you're about to become extinct.
Now we have 8%, our next one is 8%. And that's the work of the conference. So all of the things like all the committees and all the panels and boards and everything else, ministerial standing and standards, the finance and investment committee, having an audit every year, doing, paying any legal fees we have to pay, any of that kind of cost.
Also sending people to general. Synod.
Sending people to general synod, representing our conference, so that all comes to, that's 8% of
And,
the budget.
and also, again, staff time, right? Staff
Right.
time.
Staff time for all those
To
things.
make all those things
Make all those things happen.
Right, I mean, there's staff members of most of them, not all of those.
Yeah. Every committee has
boards and
somebody,
committees.
staff member attached to it, so,
Right.
yeah.
And the last budget we have is annual meeting. It's 5% of our entire budget is spent on these 2 days. That's really important. That's a saying that we think annual meeting is very important. That's also an in and an out. So when we look at our income, you'll see that 5% of our income is also annual meeting related. So it's a neutral budget item.
Anybody have any more questions on this particular slide or on this pie chart or anything? Here on that so far.
Okay, so then the next question is, where does our money come from? And this is the breakdown. 60%, 59% of our money for the conference comes directly from our church's wider mission donations from your congregations. And another 22% is your per capita contribution, which means that over 80% of the conference's budget every year comes from the local congregations. That's a huge chunk of this pie. The remainder are all very small. Only 8% of our income comes from our investments. 4% of our income comes from friends of the conference, direct contributions. 5%, as I mentioned, is annual meeting, and then we've got these little slices. 1% is department income, which is
So the department holds an event that has like
Yes.
a registration fee that generates
Right.
to
Okay.
help pay for the event.
Okay, so other events that departments hold. And then this last one, 1% is synod travel contributions. We do, because synod is every other year, we have a travel pool that gets contributed to from churches
Churches and
and
associations.
associations who are sending a delegate. And that way, instead of having an $18,000 a year cost and then a zero cost, same with income, we sort of are able to even that out. But that's only 1% of our income. So let's take a look at this biggest slice, the OCWM slice, 59% of our budget, $386,000. Take a guess. We have 141 congregations in the Vermont Conference. What would you guess is the average giving to per congregation for OCWM? Don't
Fill it down.
Okay.
Average is a percentage of your operating income.
No. What's the average gift?
Cash dollar.
For a church, no matter what size church.
Right.
We have 141 churches. What's the average?
We can probably do that.
Yeah, so let's do that.
If you're quick in math.
I'm
Okay,
gonna say-
$1,000. $1,000 is your guess.
2,000.
2,000. Anybody else?
Does everybody know what you all pay yourselves?
Do you know what your
Everybody
church?
all aware? Your own churches?
OCWM, I'll learn about percentage wise.
You're gonna guess it's under 200 that your church gives?
No.
Oh,
That wasn't
Excuse me. Spread that rumor around. What a bunch of cheapskates in that area.
well, it's all public information now.
It's all
It's
out
sent out.
stuff. Everybody knows how much
So-
everybody gave.
Our average per congregation gift is $386,000. It's $2,738 for 141 churches. What would you guess the lowest gift is? The lowest OCWM budget?
Zero.
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 And how many?
How many churches do you reckon is zero?
5.
50.
40.
41.
Wow.
So what's,
Honestly, look.
so if you average the average works out to be just over $4,000. It's like $4,062 or something.
So darn close to a third.
I was wrong, 46.
Yes.
Yeah.
Almost a third.
Almost a third of our congregations give 0 for OCWM. What would you guess is the highest dollar amount given?
Any church gives.
90,000.
Yeah,
How
nine.
much?
90,000.
90?
Nine.
9,000.
I'm gonna say 25,000.
25,000. Close,
Anybody else have a guess?
28.
Our friends at Grace Church in Rutland.
Gave $28,685. And so we also have, this is the highest dollar amount, we also have a church that gives the highest percentage of their budget. So every church has a goal, and we, the members of the annual meeting, the delegates of the annual meeting, have voted to ask churches to make it 10%, the tithe, as their goal for giving to the conference. What would you guess is the highest budget percentage? 8%. There's somebody over 10%.
15%.
15% is your guess. It's 14% from First Congregational and Randolph Center.
Our next door neighbor right here, that she was a pastor.
Now, Jim's only the pastor here for 2 more weeks, so we hope that their percentage doesn't go down, but we'll just have to see. Time will tell. They're pretty
Hopefully
committed.
they're well trained at this point.
They're pretty committed.
I was gonna say, I think at the Millbury Church, the problem a number of years ago was they were in a big budget crunch, so they cut the OCWM. And since then, they've been able to keep it the same, but even though their budget is better and better each year, powers to be, I shouldn't say powers to be, enough people controlling the budget haven't seen fit to raise that back to what it used to be.
That's pretty common. A lot of churches experiencing that.
So, in your budget, a chunk of what you pay to the Vermont Conference and your respective associations also, because every time when you're figuring out per capita, each of your associations charges it, by the way, they all charge different amounts, they're all with that, so they're not all the same, so, and you put all that together and, we know that 35%, okay, 35% goes to Cleveland, I mean, 65% stays here, and you talked about the things that we spend it on, but let's recap, we'll go through some slides.
We also came up with a lot of things that we love about what the Vermont Conference
Right.
does. We've got some of these here. Great disaster relief. We are on the ground.
Fast.
Vermont Academy. Yay, Vermont Academy. Lots of great Christian ed. We mentioned the Resource Center. Pastor convocation, new pastor support groups, continuing ed for pastors. Camp Agape, Covenant Hills, camping scholarships, all of our outdoor ministries things happen. The Vermont Congregational Home in Newbury, we support them as well. It's a very important ministry. The Vermont Low Income Advocacy Council, we're the only denomination to,
I don't think we can say only anymore.
With the highest.
We're the most significant contributor.
we're the most significant contributor
Iliac.
to having a person dedicated in Montpelier to advocating on behalf of low-income people in Vermont. All of our youth events, sending our youth to national youth event, that's part of our conference ministry. Assistance with stewardship, church vitality, retreats, conference events. And our fabulous conference staff, who we also mentioned over there, we love them very much. So on top of all of this stuff that the conference does, the National Church also does some really wonderful things. They have put together a video that is awesome. So we're just going to show you this little video about what it is that the National Church does with our OCWO contributions, that 35% or 21% of our overall budget that we send to them. Take a picture.
Our church has a wider mission than over the years, people have tried to explain our church's wider mission in lots of ways. It's money that supports the wider church. It's a mission fund. It's support for the conference and national church. Most of the time, our explanations are about as meaningful as an IRS audit. Even the acronym OCWM has become institution speak. Who wants to give money to a set of initials? Or worse, to a building in Cleveland? But here's what we know. This is Bob. When Bob gives money to his church, he does so believing that something or someone will be helped by his act of generosity. Bob feels good about that. Bob knows that churches have a lot of bills to pay. His pastor earns a salary. Utilities cost money. And the broken toilet handle needs to be fixed. It's always something. But Bob also gives money to his church because he believes that someone will be helped by that. A hungry person will be fed. A homeless person will be housed. And injustice will be right. He wants to help people around him, but he also wants to help people around the world. That's where our church's wider mission comes in. This is Wilma. Everyone considers Wilma to be a kind, thoughtful, and well-intentioned person, but Wilma by herself can't do everything. That's one of the reasons why Wilma goes to a UCC church, because she wants to join with others to pray and sing and make the world a better place. This is Wilma's UCC church. It does a lot of good things. They have great worship services, a bell choir, a youth ministry, a food pantry, and interesting study groups. Every Sunday, Wilma gives $30 to her church. Most of that money supports all the good stuff her church does. But her congregation has also decided to send $3 or 10% of Wilma's weekly offering to our church's wider mission. That way, Wilma's children can have a conference camp to go to, or a national youth event to attend. Wilma will start each day by reading a UCC devotional that lands in her email inbox, and her study group will have good materials to use. When Wilma hears that the UCC is starting hundreds of new churches across the country, she knows she's a part of it. When Wilma's pastor retires, her UCC conference minister will assist them in finding a new pastor. That's our church's wider mission at work too. This is Carlos. He lives in Chicago. He's a big White Sox fan. But Carlos also cares about people who don't live in Chicago. When Carlos heard about a terrible cyclone that devastated Vermont, for example, he wanted to help. But Carlos didn't even know where Myanmar was. But because of UCC Church's contributions to our church's wider mission, the UCC has long-standing relationships in Myanmar. So when Carlos gave a special offering to his church, 100% of that gift went directly to help the cyclone victims. Bob and Wilma and Carlos are members of local churches, but they're also members of God's big church. Individually, they can't do everything, and neither can their local churches, but they can join with others across the UCC so that they can multiply the impact of their ministries. In the United Church of Christ, each church makes a prayerful financial commitment to our church's wider mission. It helps educate its members about the covenant that UCC churches have to be in mission and ministry together, in conferences and as the United Church of Christ. Changing lives. That's our church's wider mission. And we accomplish that a million different ways. A pastor visiting a shut-in, a work group on a mission trip, a child learning Bible stories. But we also change lives in ways and places we can't see or touch, or easily or neatly explain. We advocate for justice. We build and sustain relationships around the world. We respond to disasters every 2.5 days. So remember, it's not a fund, it's not a program, it's certainly not a building. It's changing lives together. That's our church's wider mission.
Okay, so, the last slide I'm going to show you is another recap. And you see $286,000. And that's 80% of the conference's income. Or only 4% of the total of the 13 million. So only 4% is going to support all those things. And we talked about the fact that our goal is 10%. We strive to get every church to that 10%. We've got a long ways to go. But at this point, so just imagine how much there would be to work with if every church did put in 10%.
So tell us again what the total budget would
So
be.
$13 million.
13 million.
13 million.
This works out to 4%
Of the
of
13 million.
Got it.
13 million. And our OCWM contributions themselves is $386,000. The goal, the desire is for that to be 10%.
Right.
So that would be 1.3 million.
Right, 1.3 million if we actually did it instead, 529, because that's the reality of what we actually have to work with. And obviously, when you're trying to encourage giving within your congregations, you are trying to help them see that through their giving, your church, individual church would be able to do more. And when there is a reason for wanting to have more money for the conference to work with, and that is because then the conference could live out its mission and be equipping congregations for Christ's ministry and mission. And so
this amount is what you are giving for all of these things that you are getting. And that's very transactional language. And in the church, we don't use the language of transaction. We do, but maybe we shouldn't. The church isn't about transactions. The church is about transformation. So all of this money is transforming lives. It's changing lives. And the more we can pull together, the more lives we can change, the more transformation we can bring about as the Vermont Conference, as the United Church of Christ. Not just as our local churches, which is important, but when we all work together, we can do so much more. So the question that we think we should be asking is not, what are we giving for what are we getting? The question we should be asking is, what are we giving for what they are getting? The people whose lives we are changing, the people we are serving in our ministry. Sometimes that's internal, but also we know that that's external to us. What kind of impact are we able to make because of the mission and ministry that we are equipped to do because of the work of the Vermont Conference? That's the conference's mission, is to equip congregations for Christ's mission and ministry. So collectively as a conference, because of the generosity of our congregations, and because of individual members, we are able to do so much more. So we want to leave you with Paul's reminder to the people in Corinth that we are called to excel in generosity. God loves it when the giver delights in the giving. And if we can excel in generosity, then we are able to transform ourselves and transform the world. And that's really what we're all about. Thank you very much for coming today. If you have any questions, we would love to entertain them.
Yeah, can you entertain mine?
Please.
Here's the problem in our church, no matter how many times we try to explain OCWM. That word mission is really hard for our congregation to get past. Because they set a 10% mission budget, but you become into that mission instead of separate. Is there any suggestions? Because no matter how hard we try, we have a 10% mission budget, but you get grouped into it instead of being 10% alone.
Right.
And I find it so frustrating because over the course of 12 years, we cannot change the mind of OCWM.
Well, I would like to commend you for having 10% of your budget going to mission, because not all
More than
churches
that.
do. That's
It's
fantastic.
more, it's almost, I would say maybe 16% is
That's
mission.
wonderful.
Is it
But
the
you're
only-
getting only a cut of that instead of 10% of the budget.
Well, have us come do this presentation in your church,
Mhm.
and maybe that'll help them understand what exactly OCWM is and what it goes to help support.
Is it the M?
Is it the end?
Yeah, it's because of the M word.
Then
It's
just-
because it says mission.
Then just
You
tell
get
them
lumped
it's
into
been
our
changed.
mission
Tell them
budget.
it's been changed for ministry.
Yeah. It's really frustrating. because all your, material has that word. Everything you send has the word mission, and so it gets grouped into our mission budget.
Right?
Which isn't
We can-
anything
we
And
can
not that
talk
it's
about
bad, but
standards.
that's where we struggle
Right.
to,
Because you're balancing it with the mission that you're trying to do in your local community and the world.
absolutely, and
Hands-on.
it's really, no matter how many times we try to explain the mission committee, we try, we send for the pamphlets, we get it, we do it, it just stays in the mission column.
Right, well, a lot of that is semantics, and we can help talk about that, we can help unpack some of that. Maybe a narrative budget is a tool for that, but there are a lot of other ways that we can also help address that situation. Doug, is there
Well, yeah, in response to that, one of the things that I've done in our church, and it doesn't answer totally that problem, but when I try to talk, instead of talking about the alphabet soup of OCWM, I talk about that being the way we make a difference in the world. That's the way we make it, that's the primary way our church makes a difference in the world. Now, I hear you saying that there are lots of other ways that your church makes a difference in the world, but if you can be thinking about OCWM as your make a difference in the world effort, that might shift people. And I don't know, it's just a matter of how you're talking about it. It's what I'm hearing you say you're struggling to get to overcome that as an obstacle.
It's not always only how you're talking about it, it's how people are hearing it.
Yeah.
Oh, it is, I hear that word and it just
What you can
seems to
say
trigger-
whatever you want,
Right.
they've got an image, so it may be that you have to almost repackage it and and assign a whole new identity to it. And maybe, I mean, I'm not saying be deceptive, but emphasize, instead of always emphasizing the OCWM thing, like those letters, emphasizing what's happening in the rest of the world because of us belonging to the United Church of Christ Church.
Right,
what
what's
is
the story?
Yeah, that's the story. What's happening out there because we're a member of this larger denomination that we're the world.
I wanted to respond to her. Our church major fundraiser is a game supper, and we bring in lots of money and serve 1,000 people. And years ago, some forward-thinking woman said, I think we should take 10% of the profits and give it to the mission committee. And at first, first there was an advisory committee, but since it goes to the mission committee, and the mission committee has the choice to do whatever they choose with that, and we do a lot of publicity about some of it. But one of our members has served in India with Help Kids India. They were here for life, and she also was a midwife in Haiti, and so those of course are, one of our former members is a Episcopal priest in the mission of Bogota, and, we have some of those, but we also have the local, homeless shelter, but the mission committee has control of that 10% from that one project. We also do the OCM, started the project.
Do we have other questions? Please make sure that if there's anything in particular that you would like us to say or do or respond back to you, write it like right next to your name, like if you want more information on anything you said, or you would like us to come to the stewardship, representatives from the stewardship department are going around the state, and some of the churches have had our presentation that are here. Hyde Park has had my congregation, Balance Bay in Colchester, saw a version of this presentation. We don't have a whole lot of data yet on the impact that this presentation has had, but one anecdote that I can share with you is that we had this presentation come during our annual stewardship campaign window, and the next week we had an increase of $10,000 in pledges, which was like 15% of our overall goal. So that impact was pretty significant. And if you are looking for some creative new ways to talk about stewardship in your congregation, we may be able to help.
Yeah, and please note too, we take, like, in the same way that we plugged in all those numbers about the conference, that's what we would do with your church's numbers. So
Tailor this to
tailor it,
your
it would be
congregation.
about your church and taking all those categories and breaking them, that long laundry list of budget items and putting them into pieces of a pie that talk about the actual.
narrative budget for us.
Yes, exactly, yes, we do a narrative budget for, explain how you would do a narrative budget for you and give examples of how you could do it, and then
We also make it.
we make it for you for like, whatever your figures are right now. Yeah, and then you can take it on next year.
And tell your pastor, it's very minimal input from your pastor,
Yeah.
it's not, you know,
They don't have to
do it all.
Yeah, they don't- It's great if the pastor will show up, and we highly recommend that you have a potluck meal with it.
Yeah.
And
People usually come from.
come for food, and then, and the presentation's about an hour and a half in length, or hour,
45 minutes to an hour, we got,
well,
yeah, we were about 45
Yeah,
minutes.
you
Yeah.
right down.
Yeah.
so it's about an hour, like you throw in the dinner, it's about another half hour, so we're talking about an hour and a half, and it can be done on a Sunday, a weekday.
Church, evening, if you guys have a regular evening night.
How many people show up to your presentation?
Depends on the size of the congregation.
Jim, you did one at Bennington, how many people came?
40,
You did, how many came to yours?
20,
25.
25.
Pat, I just was talking to Pat Jackman, who just had one at Pittsford, and she said there were about a dozen, which for her size church is really good.
Yeah.
So,
We had 20 or 30 in Lucia's church.
Heartland,
Hartland,
yeah, we had 25 or so in Heartland.
and we recommend when, if you're gonna do it at your church, you try to get the people, the people that do stewardship would be great.
Right.
But the movers and shakers in your, and try to make sure, see if you can get them to come, because it's really gonna be those folks who are gonna take the greatest interest, but obviously anybody be welcome, but, folks who are in that decision-making capacity, and also especially people that are maybe like grudgingly, like don't like talking about budget or something, this may give them a new level of energy about budgeting that they could use. Right.
So I hear that being a really effective tool for the local church's stewardship program. And one of the things that I'm trying to suspend is the mixing that with the goal of educating the local churches about OCWM. Those are two different educational pieces. Are you able to do both of those?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
You get that OCWM little video in,
Yeah.
that's part of it, so
Okay.
it's kind of, when you get to the OCWM part of the presentation,
That's what
that's what
that
we talk
is.
about.
I got it.
And one of the things that we're able to do, because we're tailoring it to your congregation, is help you figure out what it is your congregation needs to hear.
Right.
So if they have no experience with a narrative budget, we can spend a little more time talking about narrative budgets. Because you guys have mostly seen narrative budgets, we ended up skipping through a couple of those slides. But if that's something that your congregation needs a little more focus on, we can start with that. If you're trying to do a year-round stewardship model, we can come talk about that. And the narrative budget is a fantastic tool for year-round stewardship education. And, you know, we're able to say, well, what is it that you guys need us to focus on?
So, can you, I don't know how much time you have now, but can you say a little bit more about how that becomes a tool for year-round stewardship? What is it? How does that function in that? How does a narrative budget function in year-round stewardship?
You can check in. So you can update it throughout the year, saying, so, you know, this was our goal, that we would spend, you know, this percentage
This was the
this
story
way.
we wanted this year's
This was the story we
tell.
wanted to be able to tell.
And here's
Here's
what's
our
there.
progress so far. Here's how, you know, here's how we are telling the story. Here's the part of the story we have yet to tell.
It is a great way to say, okay, we said we were gonna spend 20% of our budget on mission this year, and we're woefully inadequate on that, we're like,
How are we
only,
doing?
you know, 12%, how are we gonna beef that up? What event could we hold or do, or what kind of, project should we embrace that's gonna bring that up to our goal?
Another example might be, as you live into the year-round stewardship piece, you can look at your narrative budget and say, we committed to make our building a resource for our community. And so during the course of the year, you can have the scout troop who meets in your building, come to Sunday worship, and the scout master stand up at a mission moment and say, you know, I just want to say thank you for allowing the troop to be in the church this past year. In this last year, we signed up 6 new scouts, we made an Eagle Scout, and we couldn't do that without the resource that is the use of your facility. Thank you. And so you lift up all the things about the work that you're doing over the course of the year. That becomes a basis for your year-round stewardship, and it all refers back to your narrative budget. When you said what was important, when you said what it is that you want to do, And so all through the year, you find ways that you fulfilled that, and you lift that up in front of the congregation, preferably on Sunday morning, as a regular part of your worship.
What that, we have struggled with coming from a place of scarcity to a place of abundance. And I think that narrative budget shows you more of your abundance and it takes the spotlight off scarcity. And I love that it's taken the spotlight off salaries.
Yes.
Let's meet the budget by cutting the salaries. And it's like, wait a second. It's not salaries we're cutting, it's all the missions that we're doing that are important to us.
Exactly.
And that, this year, there hasn't been any talk about cutting salaries.
If your stewardship campaign works on a basis of, everybody needs to give 3% more this year, we're gonna have another damn deficit. That is not a campaign that's gonna be successful, it's not motivating. You know, if you, sorry. If you listen to Vermont Public Radio when they do their fund drives, I'm on the Vermont Public Radio Community Forum a couple of months ago. I was with Robin Trudeau at this event, and she says, you know, I hate everything about the way that we raise money, except that it works. And her point being that you never hear BPR say, if 86 people don't pledge by midnight, we're going off the air. They don't say that. They invite people into a relationship. They invite you to be part of a community. They invite you, if you're already a member of the community, to be a little bit bigger, better member of the community. It's always invitational. And that's the way our stewardship has to work, where you invite folks. And the narrative budget's a great tool to do that, because now you're not trying to come up with enough money for the oil bill. You're speaking the narrative about the mission and ministry that you feel called to do as an example of Christ Church. And that's a very different way to look at it. And looking at it from the narrative side, looking at it from a positive perspective, is so much more healthy than cajoling people for a bigger pledge. And if you are able to live into a year-round stewardship, it makes your pledge drive almost unnecessary. Because you've been doing your pledge drive all year long. Every time a scoutmaster stands up and says thank you, everybody who gives to your church goes, hey, that's something tangible that I can see that we do. And when you do that all year round, when it comes time to asking for the pledge, like, well, yeah, give me the slip. Because you've been working on it all year. Not for 3 chaotic weeks in the fall.
But you know, that's another thing. I'm so happy that we don't talk about money all year long. We used to. It seems to me.
Right.
I like to talk about the money, figure out how much you're going to give, and let's go on. Let's do
our
the
mission.
minutes. Yeah, and this allows you,
So-
you're talking about it with the narrative budget, but you're not talking about dollars.
You're talking about
You're talking about results,
Right.
ministry, programs, how are you serving? And that's what you're talking about.
And you're not saying, please, please, please give more money. You're saying, don't you want to be a part of this?
What we're doing.
This growing, this vibrant, this
The
evolving.
laughter
Yeah.
Right.
that we share, the information.
He's gonna blow up.
Go ahead, Jim.
I want to give you one more example of a way that we transform the culture of our church. The First Congregational Church in Morrisville, every year ran about a $10,000 budget deficit. Every year. It was just planned on. It was their deficit. And they spent all year long fretting about how to come up with that $10,000. So one year before their annual meeting, I met with their leadership and I said, okay, so this is what you have to pledge to me. We're going to go a year without talking about that $10,000. And we're going to authorize the treasurer over the course of the year to take an extra $10,000 out of the endowment as it's needed to fill that deficit. And then we bar you from talking about money at your church council, your church leadership board meetings for the next 6 months. Well, guess what? That was all they ever did at their board meetings, was argue about money. And when they didn't have money to talk about, they weren't sure what to do. But after a couple of 3 meetings, they figured out, well, maybe we could talk about what we could do. And so they did that. And so they started these new ministries, they started these new missions, they had all this new energy because they weren't spending all their time bickering about money. And guess what? At the end of the year, they didn't need the $10,000. Because everybody's so excited about what they were doing as a church that the giving to things increased on its own during the course of the year without anybody even asking for more. It's much healthier.
something in the Bible about if you're rich you can't get to heaven, or, you know, the money change, I mean, there's, the Bible that says money is terrible, don't receive it. Well, my goodness, if you're not ready to receive money, how in the world are you gonna give it? So it's like, for me, it's thinking about, okay, balancing the giving and the receiving. And I always think, okay, what am I gonna give? I need to give enough so I feel good, but not so much that I feel resentful. Because God doesn't want me to feel resentful.
God delights, loves when the giver delights in giving.
Exactly. And that really has been my touchstone for how to.
That's great.
How to
And when
give.
you empower generosity, which is what we're trying to do, you do that by talking about being generous. You don't do that by not talking about money. But you give people tools so that they're comfortable talking about money and talking about generosity. You can say, my goal is to be a more generous person. And that could be more than just money. So what's my ministry? What's my gift? And then, you know, we come back to the transactional language if we're not careful. What's the impact of my generosity?
And on that note, on your way out, because it is time for us,
Yeah.
if you want to pick up one of these, are you ready to talk about money in your church? They're from UCC. And again, if you want us to do anything for you, send you anything, be in touch with you, please let us know. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much.